first of all, thank you very much, Ryan, for joining us this morning. I appreciate the time. I know you're a busy man. So for those that maybe don't know you or not maybe huge rugby fans, could you give us a little bit of a introduction of who you are and a bit about you?
Yeah, I'm Ryan, as you mentioned. Now, I guess retired, ex-professional slash international rugby player. Played for about 13 years, mostly for Glasgow Warriors, over 100 games there. Played for Scotland about 25 times, I think. And then was lucky enough to represent the British Lions in 2013. And yeah, now I'm retired for about 7 years working in the alcohol space because rugby and alcohol go hand in hand, so that
Yeah,
helps. But
not
yeah,
just not just the consumption.
no, well, turns out not. Originally, it was just pure consumption, but
Now
um,
selling.
yeah, now trying to convince other people to consume.
Consume. Aye. We all love pushers. It's good. No, great, and we'll certainly dig into that a little bit more as we move through the podcast. What I was really keen to do though is understand a little bit more about your early life. If you could maybe share a little, your kind of journey through school, where you grew up. I know you've got quite an interesting past.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, I'd love you to kind of share a little bit about that, if that's okay.
yeah, yeah. I'm agreeing with you. Like, I'm super interesting. Um, yeah, I guess a pretty unorthodox route. I was born in Glenrothes in Fife in Scotland, and yeah, my old man worked in a paper mill, and we weren't, I guess we weren't wealthiest, and lived in a council house and stuff like that. Um, and rugby was never really part of my life then, just because rugby in Scotland isn't really prominent, I guess, in the public school system. But when I was 10, my dad got an opportunity to move out to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and he did that, and we shortly followed. And it turned out that he was really good at his job, so progressed quite quickly. And when I guess at that time when you moved overseas, you kind of got the schooling taken care of. Your our accommodation was all paid for, so it was a pretty seamless move. And yeah, I started at an international school out there called Garden International, and I think it was like my first or second day at school. Somebody walked in and I had no mates. This really pasty Scottish kid in amongst all these sun-kissed expats, and they were like, "Yeah, we're starting our school rugby team. Is anybody interested?" Having never played rugby in my life, at that point, I was just like, "Yeah, shit, I need some mates. I need to do something." So that seems like a good place to start, and then, yeah, I guess for the next until I was 18, I lived in Kuala Lumpur, and I played for a
Right.
team out there called Cobra Club, and then I changed schools about halfway through my time out there. I went to a school called Alice Smith's International School, and like at the time, the grass is always greener, and I always thought like, oh, I'd love to be in Scotland and drinking bucky
Mm,
with my mates in the park, as opposed to living in this kind of tropical paradise. But
yeah,
looking back on it now, I was so lucky with the childhood I had. Just to be able to go swimming every day and it to be sunny every day, and
yeah.
totally took it all for granted, having spent the last 14 years in Scotland now. Um, but yeah, that was kind of, I guess, my younger years, and there was no we had a pretty good school rugby team after starting that. We became Southeast Asian champions, and yeah, I just played a lot of rugby, and because I was bigger than most Asians, it was fine to go out and have a beer when you were like 15, because no one ID'd you because you were a bit taller than everybody else
Yeah.
and about 5 stone heavier.
We always so you started putting up at 10. We always, I mean, I guess maybe bigger than some of your teammates and stuff. Was that, were you clearly bigger, like in terms of at that point from an early age?
No, not really. It was kind of the school stuff was like, it was an international school, right? So everybody was,
From everywhere?
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember we had a couple of Fijian guys called Ben and Carlos. I think their dad was the Fijian ambassador or something like that, and they were
Right. Okay.
really good mates of ours, but like phenomenal rugby players,
Uh
massive
huh.
guys. And then the club teams in Malaysia, although they were, very developmental, if you like, tier three nations in terms of rugby. They would import like players from New Zealand and Fiji.
Really?
Well, yeah. Um, the Cobra Club, with the team that I played for, had three Fijians that were on the payroll, and they would fly over from Fiji when they weren't playing in like the NPC in New Zealand and stuff. So there was just these three players that would just fucking smash everybody, and then Malaysian guys running around. But they kind of took me under their wing, and yeah, whenever we did like away trips and stuff like that, I was really lucky. Like I would just spend time with them, and they're really, really humble people, really accepting, and whatever they're doing, you have to be involved in. I don't know if you've ever heard of kava. It's kind of like this big wooden bowl they have, and it's I think it's like a ground up root, but it tastes like puddle water.
All right.
I
won't ask how you know what puddle water tastes like right enough, but
or it kind of looks like puddle water, but it's
okay.
like it's like a Fijian tradition, and then we just did that all the time, and it made your lips tingle, and it made you hallucinate after a while, it made you a bit drunk. But I was smashing it when I was 14 years old with these Fijian guys. So I think that really helped my rugby career, just being baptism by fire type thing.
With those guys,
Yeah.
Possibly exposure you wouldn't have got if you did grow up in Scotland around just Scottish guys or what have you. And in terms of, so obviously going over there at 10, I'm intrigued to know, like, something that we've never talked about actually. How did you feel going over there at 10? Like, were you shitting yourself? Were you worried about it, going into a new school, new country? Obviously, like you said, life maybe wasn't always the easiest in Scotland maybe at that point, and obviously your dad got this a chance to go over there, and it sounds like his career, just the trajectory just really took off for him. So there's probably some really good upside there.
Yeah.
But how did you feel when you first moved over?
It's tough to remember. Like I see photos and stuff like that of us, like standing at the airport and saying goodbye to everybody. But I think,
do you remember that?
Not like I kind of remember it when I see the photos. But yeah, I don't remember being like overly emotional about it, or I think I was too young to really appreciate what was happening. And I think it was very close to the time where I would be transitioning from primary school to secondary school, so there was a kind of big change on the horizon anyway coming. It just so happened that my secondary school was now at the other side of the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say I've always been like quite outgoing and quietly confident, or maybe not quietly, but just
definitely
confident.
Wouldn't say quietly. No. And in terms of school, then, like, how did you do academically? How did you find school?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was an academic at all. I was chatting about this to my wife the other day, and maybe you at the barbecue when we were steaming. Yeah, I didn't do well in school. So much so that I got a call after we did our GCSEs, and I think that I can't remember what the criteria was. It was maybe for like 5Bs or something like that to move forward to your A levels, and I had scraped by the skin of my teeth, and just kind of post summer holidays got a phone call from a guy called Mr. Elliot at the time, who I think was like the year coordinator or something like that. And he phones me and he's like, "Oh, I think that you should repeat that year and try and get better results before you go into your GCSEs." And I was like, "Fuck no."
Yeah.
That's social suicide, mate.
Yeah, I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, I'd rather just be a dumbass and try and get through my A levels. So I actually only did a year of A levels. So you do like AS levels, and then you get your full A level.
Right.
And I only stayed in Malaysia for the first part of that, and then came back to Scotland after that. Came back to join the army.
Right. Okay. And when did you make that decision to join the army?
I watched Band of Brothers.
Unreal.
And then I was like, shit, that's for me.
I'm in.
That's what I need to do. I had a mate from kind of primary school who I guess loosely stayed in contact with, because obviously it wasn't easy to stay in contact when we were kids.
Yeah, social media and all that stuff wasn't as much of a thing.
Nah. So he kind of joined the parachute regiment, and I kind of heard about that, and I spoke to him about it. And yeah, like I said, I guess the school system just made me feel like I wasn't doing that well, so I needed another career path, because it clearly wasn't academic. And at the time, I knew I was okay at rugby, but I was playing in a country that, like I said, they were a tier three nation. There was no way
Yeah,
for
yeah,
me to be able to come back here and say, yeah, I'm going to be a professional rugby player. So
yeah,
that was never a conversation that I ever entertained,
yeah,
let alone it never even came up, to be honest.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
so yeah, I kind of said to my mum and dad, listen, I'm not enjoying school. I feel like I might be better suited to something more active, outdoorsy, and I wanted to join the army. So my mum and dad were like, sure, if that's what you want to do, then we'll support you in that. And they sent me back to Scotland when I was 18, which was pretty cool because they have a house back in Fife, and my gran and grandpa at the time they lived right next door.
right.
So I had like this 4 bedroom bungalow all to
Yeah,
myself, and then
ideal.
because I didn't have a job, because they were like, because I was like basically training to get in the army.
Yeah, yeah,
I was decent at rugby, but I wasn't fit enough for that kind of stuff. So
right.
I had to do about 3 or 4 months of like trying to shed a bit of timber and
Yeah,
a bit fitter. But my mum would send money to my gran who lived next door, and she would get me to write a shopping list every week. So every week I would start out like, you kind of, I don't know, steak, eggs, blah, 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 whatever it is you eat. And then by kind of week 4, I was like 12 cans of Tennent's. I just started pushing the boundaries a bit.
and as your Scottish diet becomes more
Yeah, they
comes to
get
the
they get
forefront.
back into it. Yeah. So that was like 6 months of like what was meant to be getting ready for the army that just ended up me being a complete bum. And then my mum came back and she was like, "This is not on. You're off." And that was it. Yeah, I joined the army.
How did that go?
It went really well.
Yeah,
It's funny. I actually remember getting on the bus like I was a total bum, and you get on the bus to go off to your kind of. So you do this thing before basic training starts, where they see if you do like an aptitude test, and you
yeah,
run a mile and a half, and I think it's 10 minutes or something like that, and the guy gets on the bus and he's like, if anybody here has smoked any marijuana in the last week or two, get off the bus now. And I was like, I was blazing the night before. I'm sitting on the bus like, if I get off this bus and tell my mum
you've
that,
been rumbled already.
I'm absolutely done.
Was
So I
your mum still in Scotland waving you off type of
Yeah,
thing as
yeah,
well?
she's looking for the bus, like, get out, you dick. She was, I think she was in Scotland. But yeah, I just kind of prayed, and obviously it worked out, and I ended up going to the army, and that was fine. But no, the army was good. It was good for me. Like I said, I was a bit heavier because I always played prop in the front row. I did struggle a bit with the kind of endurancey type stuff, but
Yeah,
you do 12 weeks of basic training, which is like one of the hardest things you'll ever do if you're not that way inclined. Yeah, kind of weight just dropped off me. I think that's part of the reason I became a better rugby player.
yeah, yeah.
I was probably carrying too much weight before and wasn't fit enough. Yeah, got dropped down to, well, like light for me anyway, like 90 kilos, and yeah, just kind of enjoyed it all. Enjoyed the
Yeah.
kind of like the discipline side of it and the routine, and there was times in basic training where you just wanted to quit because
Yeah, yeah.
but that's what it's designed to do.
Of
It's
course
it's,
it's yeah.
it's a bit of mental toughness. Um, and then after that 12 weeks, I went to Blandford. No, sorry, I've skipped a part there. I had my troop sergeant at the time was this massive, scary guy, and he happened to be a Fijian. He was called Sergeant Kama, and he was like a funny bloke, but terrifying. If you got the wrong side of him, or terrifying if he just wanted to intimidate you or tell
Yeah,
you
yeah.
something wrong, or
Knew
which
what he
is
was doing. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, doing his job really
yeah,
well, like almost too well.
yeah.
Um, but he
I've
found
seen
out
that
after,
with some of your players recently. Is that where you get that from? Or is it?
yeah, yeah, and it works. Um, but yeah, he kind of found out that I played rugby, and yeah, I ended up playing a little bit, and like from that moment on, I kind of got it easy.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
Okay.
if I did something and then someone else did something, the punishment for me would be less because I was one of the rugby boys now,
Got you. Got
if
you.
that made sense. And I was like, oh, like this could be quite helpful. So when I went to phase 2, it's called, down in Blandford, where I think it was like 25 weeks of like comms training, which is I was in the Royal Corps of Signals, and within a couple of weeks down there, I played a game and then got into the core rugby team. So before I was even a kind of Royal Signaller, if you like, I was playing for the core rugby team, And then yeah, life after that was just pretty easy. Pretty shortly after that, I got into the army rugby team, and then went on this 6 week tour to South Africa as a kind of 18-year-old. It was just it was unreal. And then kind of the rugby career just started snowballing, and then
Yeah, yeah.
ended up playing combined services, which is like the best of Army, Navy, and RAF. And then yeah, I got called up to the Scotland under 21 squad after that.
Amazing. How did that happen? Like, was there just scouts watching you, or how does that work?
Yeah, so there's a team called the Scottish Exiles, I guess, and it's Scottish guys that play abroad, and yeah, one of their guys came to I think an army game against like army plays against like Wasps A and stuff like that. So yeah, maybe came. I can't remember exactly what it was, but then he said to me, "Listen, when you come down to this training camp," um, so obviously I was buzzing to at the time. Again,
Yeah, yeah.
still not no like ambitions of playing professional rugby at all at this point.
Did you even know that was on the roadmap? Like that could have been. No. Okay.
Nah, not at all. It wasn't
Yeah.
until I played this Exiles game, and then they were like, "Do you want to come and play Scotland under 21s?" And it was my first time in the Scotland 21s camp, and then everyone was like everyone around me had professional rugby contracts, and I was like,
Really? Right.
"That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys get paid way more than the squaddies do."
Yeah. And you have more fun too.
Yeah, so I kind of did a year of both. So I signed with a team called the Border Reivers, who are now disbanded, but they were kind of like the third professional Scottish team.
Okay.
Yeah, they kind of offered me a kind of dual contract, so they paid me a bit, and the army paid me, and I ended up falling into this kind of recruiting role with the army, where I would walk about in my camo trousers with my Scotland rugby shirt on and say like, "Join the army, you can be like me." So
Class.
like I genuinely don't have anything bad to say about my time in the army. It was great, and even when
How long were you in it for? Was it two
uh,
years?
no, just under 4 years it was.
Oh right. Wow.
So I was just shy of the kind of first exit point, if you like, because you have to do
Okay.
four.
Got you.
Uh, but I got offered a full time contract then from Edinburgh, and they said the prerequisite that was I had to leave the army. And again, phoned up my I can't even remember what he would be called now, but my RSM sergeant major, and just said, "Listen, I've got this opportunity. Can I take it?" And he was like, "Go, I'll pack your room up." He was a guy called Neil Hunt, total legend, and he was like, "Go, I'll pack your room up."
That's class, isn't
The
it?
sergeant major was in like rolling my posters up and putting my PlayStations away and handing all my kit, but I didn't even have to go back to York. I was based
Oh
out of York
wow.
at the time. And he's a good guy, we're Facebook pals and everything now, and hope he's doing well. But yeah, that was it was kind of a whirlwind. It was I
Yeah.
was in the army, but past training, I was pretty much in rugby kit the whole time.
Yeah. And so, obviously, kind of thinking back from when you were at school and stuff, and you've got some kind of obviously mixed memories and stuff there. Sounded like it obviously got easier once you found rugby, I guess. But then, so transitioning then from school into army, then into rugby, like, is there any particular like real challenges that you can remember along the way that you were just like, oh fucking hell, like, this is just absolutely savage. That you often look back at even now, thinking, I don't know how I got past that, or anything that sticks out.
Nah,
No, it was so easy.
no, I think it definitely like a lot of there are a lot of big life moments, right? Like deciding to leave school and join the army.
Yeah. And
Uh,
so, just on that, sorry, just what was it about school that you feel just didn't work for you? With obviously, you're obviously not like you mentioned earlier. You felt as if you're a dumb arse. Obviously,
yeah,
that's not the case. But what was it about school that made you feel like that? Anything in particular?
I think just the constant like I don't know what the right word is here, but it's like the constant negative feedback. I would say
Yeah,
it's like after a while, I'm just I kind of just felt like there's no other option for me.
yeah. You become numb to it almost.
Yeah, yeah. When someone's telling you like you need to go back a year, and you're constantly like you're getting results that are like I said, I wasn't thick, like I wasn't like failing anything, but being told that like what I was getting wasn't good enough, and
Hmm.
just frustrated, I guess. And I think like being older now, looking back at the school system, you're like maybe that's not the best way to
Yeah,
to bring people up. But yeah, I think I don't want to say forced into it, but certainly made the decision to leave school a lot easier.
Mm.
Just the fact that when other than playing sport and my friends, going in there was like a bit of it was like a real chore.
Did you feel like you had many options? So, like, obviously you chose army. You got some pretty significant moves. You chose to go other side of the world without your mum and dad to back to Scotland. I appreciate a place that you probably visited relatively regularly, but still big change to do that. And I guess yes, the adventure would have been good, but still at 18, we're all still wet behind the ears. We don't know what you're going into. You're definitely going to be scared, even if you won't say it to anyone at the time. But is there anything that, like, anything particular there that you would have done like differently, or do you think that there was any other like options on the table?
I don't know. It felt like at the time the only two options open to me were join the army or get better grades and get to university, which I was being told at the time you're not your grades aren't good enough to go to university. So yeah, there's probably a part of me at the time that did feel kind of pigeonholed into what my options were, and that army was an option maybe that I could save face in. If I left school on my terms, if that makes sense.
Mm.
I've decided to go and leave and go to the army. Other than I'm worried that I'm not going to get enough grades to get into university, so I'm going to leave early type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there probably was an element of that. I don't ever think about it now. It just seems like I made the right decision, I guess. Yeah.
And that's the thing. I mean, because it's funny, and the reason I ask all about this as well is that I didn't have I don't have any real fond memories of school other than the social element of it, like making friends and all that kind of good stuff, going out and probably too much, and even just always done that. But when you think about it, like, academically, I pretty much failed everything. Definitely, I think my parents are both teachers, and I think they were literally told in every single parents' evening, or whatever you call them, could do better, and all that kind of stuff. And I definitely feel that now, obviously, my son's at school and different things, I'm much more aware of how different people will learn things. Like there's just no way I could ever have learned, and I just didn't learn in the traditional school setting. But then, I guess, I mean, I was never particularly good at sports. Absolutely nowhere getting close to in professional by any stretch of the imagination. So, and I would never have had something like that to potentially aim towards. So I'd scraped through, like, just getting enough in terms of results and stuff to get into college and then into uni and different things. And my mum just always used to say, just get that bit of paper. Just get that bit of paper. That's what you need to get. And at the time, to be fair, like when I got it, like back, what's that, 2006, I left uni, I think it was 2006, 2007, I don't know. So you actually needed it then. I don't know if it's quite so much now, but definitely then it was definitely a point where getting into certain jobs, if you didn't have a degree, you almost wouldn't get even an opportunity to speak to somebody. I think there's less. I think with the growth of things like LinkedIn and stuff now, you've got more access to people than you would do beforehand. And in terms of like so like thinking about like that early point, so obviously getting into professional rugby, what was that like? Like starting off, like, do you remember back like first few days, first few weeks of like how that went, or was it just a total whirlwind?
Yeah, like it was a whirlwind. I've had too many concussions now.
I was going to say you've had a lot of head knocks and a lot of bevy in between.
No, I do have like it was just like I guess when you're a young rugby player, like everything is trying to be professional, but you don't really believe that you will be. And there's all these little moments in rugby where you get like you get given your kit and then you walk about in that for ages and you think you're cool as fuck because you've got all your kit on. So going to like Scotland 21's camp for the first time and then get given like Scotland kit, I was like, fucking, this is cool. Yeah. Um, and then you meet everybody, and then there's obviously like a feeling of inadequacy a little bit. You're like, shit, am I way in over my head here? And the beautiful thing about rugby, I think, is as soon as the whistle goes, all that goes out the window, and you either hold your own or you're found wanting. And luckily for me, I held my own. it's a game where you put your body on the line physically for other people. You hurt, you sweat. So as soon as you've gone through 80 minutes with that, there's like a bond there that probably doesn't exist in normal life. I don't think.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, it was a whirlwind, and it was an amazing experience, and it was amazing to be able to phone my parents and be like, listen, I've got a trial at Scotland 21s. My dad's buzzing, and
yeah, I bet.
uh, yeah, and it was like pretty quickly after those couple of games, I was just like, it felt like 10 minutes later, I was like, holy shit, I'm playing in the Six Nations, like the under 21 Six Nations here. And then we got to go to that. That was pretty cool. Just to touch on that quickly,
Yeah,
going on tour together and traveling away with like 30 blokes that you get along with like really well.
yeah,
That was when I was kind of like, no, this is for me. I need to knuckle down here, and
yeah,
because at that point, all these other guys they were like I said, semi-professional or playing some form of rugby, and they had weight programs and nutrition plans,
yeah,
and I didn't have any of that. I was just a squaddy that happened to be half decent at rugby, I
yeah.
guess. Um, so that was the point where I was like, yeah, no, I want this for me. I'm going to start taking it a bit more seriously.
And how do you? So I think that's really interesting because I think probably I don't know what the percentage would be, but probably a good 90 odd % of folk that play professional rugby and or at a really senior level have gone to probably a private school and come
Oh,
through that was I don't know what the stat would be, but pretty damn high I would have thought, and they've come around it and they've started playing from early primaries, so it's their body almost molds with the sport that they start playing, even if it is obviously a lot softer at a young age.
yeah,
But you can see that the body molds with that, right? So you're obviously coming in from a different place completely. How did what was the kind of mindset you had? Where you think what was going through your mind? Did you think of it like that? Do you think like fuck, I've got to come in here, my elbows up, and really make a name for myself pretty quick, or did you feel different coming in at a different kind of place or angle from others?
yeah, I think so. Like a lot of these guys knew each other. I didn't know anybody. I was
Yeah,
based in York, and I was the only guy from the Exiles team that came up. And
got you.
these boys had played together through 16s,
Yeah,
18s, so they all had relationships. But like I said, the one thing, the beautiful thing about rugby is that you get a chance to prove yourself pretty quickly.
yeah,
And I think in most cases, people, your peers, I guess, or your teammates can see you, putting your body on the line is the best way I can put it for them. Then friendships grow pretty quickly out of that.
yeah,
And yeah, genuinely, it didn't take long for me at all to feel like part of that team, and still in contact with quite a lot of those boys now. Even God, 20 years later.
yeah.
Um,
And I think it makes a lot of sense. I think you're literally earning the respect in 80 minutes, aren't you? It's obviously being a sociable guy and always up for a laugh and all that kind of stuff helps. But it's the 80 minutes, isn't it? That's where you earn the respect and you cut through probably the years of them getting to know each other. Because
yeah,
if you're handy and you're solid and you do what you say you're going to do, that's all you need. I would have
yeah,
thought.
that's step one.
Yeah,
Because you can be a Dan the Jack the lad.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
You can be Jack the lad outside of rugby, but if you're not trying on the
yeah.
pitch, you're not like no one's going to respect you.
And you're going to get found out pretty quick, aren't you?
Yeah, I also think that, the army gave me like I went into that like reasonably confident. I knew I could run for like 20 miles with a backpack on. I knew I was fit,
Mm,
and then also knew I was willing to. I was willing to hurt myself. So
yeah, yeah.
put those two together, you can't question anyone's, I guess, integrity on the pitch. Then, uh,
See, if obviously when you were in the army, you got exposure that you needed to get into rugby, right? It wouldn't have happened if you were at school that a scout would have been passing your school and found you and brought you into the under 21s Scotland lineup or whatever. That wouldn't have happened. But do you think you needed the army, not in terms of getting into it, but just mentally, you needed those nearly 4 years in the army to I suppose, mature, maybe? Or do you think you could have done it from school? Or would it have been a very different Ryan?
that yeah, it would have been a much softer, probably like a bit fatter.
Just
Yeah,
softer mentally, physically.
I think that having spent a year in the army training, and not just like training, there was other things that happened there. We lost some friends, and you go through some really hard times together. Yeah, I don't think I probably would be as mentally, without sounding like a wanker, strong now had I not done that at quite a young age. Because confidence at school is bravado a lot of the times because you haven't accomplished anything, you don't know anything. So yeah, I definitely think walking probably into that Scotland rugby environment, I did have a bit of confidence that I knew I could do things that probably a lot of them couldn't do. Not on the rugby pitch, but just having that, I guess that feather in your cap gave you a bit of confidence. But yeah, like I said, it wasn't long before I felt like part of the team, and I didn't feel like I needed to prove myself other than in between the white lines.
Yeah. And in terms of more like in your kind of as you were obviously professional and in your during your career, like any particular like highlights or things that you look back on and think that was just unbelievable.
So many, like I was so lucky to have played the game for as long as I did. Like winning, we had the 10-year reunion for Glasgow
Yeah,
Warriors a few weeks ago. I can't believe that's been 10 years since we won that, but what a journey that was. When I joined the Warriors, we finished 11th out of 12 teams that year, and then we just started building, and then we got fourth, third, second, and then we eventually won it. And we did that with the same group of guys, the same core group of guys, and looking at it now, you'd say, yeah, we had some superstars in the team like Finn Russell and Leonie Nakawara, but at the time, those guys weren't big names, and it was just a team of guys that were just willing to put the work in for each other. And
yeah,
it sounds wanky to say, but we weren't the greatest rugby players in the world, but we just fucking were so hungry for it together.
yeah.
That there was so much accountability to everybody else that that we got there. And yeah, the great thing I've always said to everybody that asks, the great thing about rugby versus business is that something happens on a Saturday and you fuck something up on a Saturday, you see the video on the Monday and you fix it on the Tuesday, and the feedback loops super quick and you can make big improvements fast. Whereas in our current lives in the business world, I feel like that could that could really learn from sport.
It can be more difficult, yeah, for sure. It can often take more time just to see those trends, can't it?
Yeah.
And in terms of like, you talked there about the bond, is there anything in particular that drove that bond? Was it, whether it be around like leadership or anything like that, that any particular components you thought, God, if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have become the team we became?
Yeah, I think leadership definitely helped. We had the team captain was a guy, Al Kellogg, who just a really vocally inspirational guy. He could get the room going at the drop of a hat, and that really helps. When someone can put powerful words behind something. But it's the same kind of thing as the army thing. I think that there was anywhere up to 35 guys in that squad that, given the opportunity, would put, yeah, like it sounds cheesy and I've said it a lot, but put their bodies on the line. So if you weren't doing that, then you weren't part of the team. So every performance, there was a level expected from everybody
Yeah,
in the squad that was within the playing squad, and because we were such good friends, you never wanted to let anybody down.
yeah,
So you played through hurt, you played through injury, not because verbally it was expected of you, because internally you expect it from yourself, because
yeah,
you expect it from them. I'd be the first guy to stand up and call someone out if I didn't think they were putting an effort.
yeah,
And you've met a few of my friends now, and Chris would be the same. So would Richie Vernon, Rory Jackson. All these guys who would be like, that wasn't good enough, and you don't
yeah.
ever want to have that feeling of your
Being the
teammate.
guy that dropped it, yeah.
Yeah.
And was
So
that
I think
often done like straight after the game, like just in the dressing room, just sitting there? Just is that typically when these things happen, or do you wait? Do you let it sit?
no, I think no, it's like the feedback's immediate.
Immediate, yeah.
You know within yourself if you let yourself down on the pitch, and there was an element of own your shit there. something happened, if we were, if you missed a tackle, for example, that led to them beating us,
Yeah, yeah.
and we didn't get in the change room after, and you didn't put your hand up and say, "Listen, lads, that was bullshit. I'll work on it this week." Squashed. If you didn't say that, and it took someone else to call you out,
Even
then
worse. Yeah.
even worse. Yeah, then you're
Yeah,
done.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so there was a real kind of yeah, you hold yourself to the same standards that you expect from everybody else.
yeah. Uh-huh.
And if you make a mistake, you own it as quick as possible. And yeah, that was, we did analysis on Monday, so there were times where you would maybe be out of position and hadn't realised at the time,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
those bigger moments they were addressed straight away, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
everything else was dealt with kind of Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah, yeah. And in terms, I mean, look, I've always been inspired by like high performing sports people. I think there is so much alignment between sport and business. Maybe not the feedback back loops being as instantaneous, but a lot of the characteristics you need to be successful in sport is the same in business and vice versa. Some of us just aren't gifted with the size and skill. But anyway, but in terms of thinking back to when you were playing professionally, because you would have been surrounded with so many like top people, leaders, even from sport and business, I'm sure over time. Is there any like advice you were given that you still think about like all the like almost like gives you kind of goosebumps when you think about it and think, God, that's unreal, and you've been able to bring it into your current almost day to day life?
Yeah, I think like when you're a young rugby player and your stock's high and you're playing for Scotland and all that stuff. If I had a pound for every guy that had said to me like, start networking, and at the time I was like, "What the fuck's networking? I'm having some drinks with my friends." But yeah, start networking early, and I'm now the guy that says it to the younger guys.
Yeah,
But like, if I guess if there's one thing I've learned from like the army, from rugby, and from business, is it's all people. Um, and if someone thinks you're a prick, they're not gonna help you. They're not gonna
no,
buy from you. They're not gonna
yeah,
sell. They're not gonna play you on the pitch if
yeah,
that's a coach. Whatever it is, if you're a prick, um, then it's not going to work out for you. So I think like the best bit of business, the best advice that I was ever given, and I was given it multiple times, was to just talk to as many people as you can.
yeah,
Um, because and not to be the talker all the time, to listen, to really listen, because you know there's something that you can learn from everybody, I guess, and there's something you can learn about everybody. And I think when you understand that there's value in something that someone's saying, even if it doesn't seem obvious, the good will come out of it. If that makes sense. Does that like I don't know if I've just been talking shite there, but
no,
um,
no. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's definitely probably the one thing that I was told, again, not coming from a sporting environment whatsoever, but from early stage in business, it was like go out and network, speak to people, build it,
yeah,
make your go to things, even if you're uncomfortable or you're like, oh God, I don't want to do this event or go. It's worth doing because you just never know
yeah,
who you might meet, and if you're a good guy or a good girl, you never know how that connection could lead to something really important like down the line. And it might, and it's, I think as well, it's not having that short term view of stuff, is it? It's like you're not trying, because every time I think if you try and monetize a moment, almost you're
yeah,
like, oh, what am I going to get out of it? It's like, well, potentially something massive, but it might take 10 years to come,
yeah,
but it could be enormous. Do you know what I mean?
yeah. Just
So I
be
think it's
just be
advice really important.
yeah, just be a good guy, because
Yeah,
like you never know who you're meeting, and like me as well as most people now, Gareth, and I'll when it's me and my group of friends, I won't be as positive.
that's an interesting way to put it.
And I'll relax a bit more. I definitely think that when you're in a room full of people, like you say, you don't know who you're meeting. It doesn't. It just yeah. It's totally worth just spending a couple of minutes speaking to as many people as you can, because you never know who you're meeting, or who you can help, or who might help you further down the line. And I think that's what I think is the key to a successful business is having as big a network as possible,
Yeah,
and have them willing to work with you, because you never know when you might need to call on someone.
yeah. And I think, like, to touch your point there, I don't think it's you not being positive, I think is the way you put it, but I think it's more you're a very straight up guy. And I think that comes from 10, 15 years playing professional rugby and coming from a background in the army. You you see it how it is. Now, some people are okay with that and some people aren't. That's just is what it is. So I don't see it as a negative thing. I think you know where you stand with you, which I think is a huge positive.
Yeah.
You're either an arsehole, you're all right. I think is
We
is
had
the way. But I think that's good. And so thinking about obviously like that transition then. So you know, being successful in the army, that obviously went really well. I'm sure plenty of ups and downs and some scary moments. And you mentioned obviously losing some friends, which is you know obviously really sad and a lot of stuff you have to kind of deal with at a young age. Transitioning into you know, unbelievable circumstance of going into professional sport, whatever that might be, you know, and then playing for multiple teams and then obviously your country, and now business, you know, and with a bang almost. Like, so talk us through that. How was that transition from professional rugby into your first business?
Brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's tough. I think you know, you can't prep for it. I think they're maybe trying now with a lot more of the younger boys, but
Okay.
certainly when I retired, you know, 32, 33 years old, you're leaving you're leaving the only thing that you know,
Yeah.
uh, and you're spoon fed through it, right? You know,
Yeah.
I'm told like be here at this time, bring your passport, we've checked you in, you know, here eat this, like you have to come down and eat, blah blah blah. You know, everything's prescribed for you, and you don't have to think at all other than your performance to right. Fuck, I need to make money now,
Yeah.
and I don't know anything other than this game. Um, what do I do? Type thing.
Yeah.
So I guess I wasn't thinking about retirement until I got like a prolapse disc in my back, and it kind of shut down the my left leg for like 7 months. Like kind of dragging my leg around for 7 months, and that kind of preempted the conversation. Like
Yeah.
this might not come back. Like what do you want to do? So I started thinking about it pretty early on, and I did a degree through the Open University
Oh, nice.
in environmental science because you know from army rugby I wanted to be outside.
Yeah.
So I started kind of venturing down that road a little bit, and then luckily my strength came back a bit to the point where I left and went down to England to play. And as soon as I got down there, they were like, you know, you're not going to pass a medical with that prolapse disc.
Shit.
Yeah, so much so that I was getting epidurals to play games.
Oh.
So I kind of knew it was coming, and then the Warriors said to me, "Would you come back for one more year to cover, but also just to help mentor some of the young boys?"
Yeah.
So I was pretty lucky. I had that kind of year to finish my degree and think about what was next after rugby. But even then, you know, I must have gone to meet hundreds of people who you know were willing to sit down and chat to me about what I wanted to do post rugby. But none of that came to anything because you know a lot of people want to meet you, but can they actually help? Probably not.
Were they wanting to meet you because who you are? No, and I'm not taking away from where you were going, but like the rugby Ryan almost was
Yeah, definitely.
okay.
Yeah, I'd say you know I met a lot of people, and a lot of people gave me time that had good intentions.
Mm,
Uh, Good intentions is probably not the right word. Like everybody had good intentions, but whether there was something like tangible there after that
yeah,
meeting, like most of the time there wasn't.
right.
And I did like a lot of work experience. Guys at Scottish Energy Networks were really good to me. They kind of said, "Come in and do all this work experience and see what you like, and then we can try."
Yeah, nice.
But I didn't like any of it. You know, it was all sitting in a a big corporate building, and
Yeah,
it wasn't what I thought environmental science was going to be. So we were kind of lucky enough that we were sponsored by Eden Mill at the time. I don't know if you've heard of
yeah,
them, a gym company. And I knew the owner, a guy called Paul, and I said to Paul, "Listen, would you give me a job? I'm thinking about retiring. I've got a degree in environmental science now, blah blah blah." And he was like, "Yeah, come on up to the distillery, and we can chat about it. And you know, if you can green up the distillery, essentially, then there might be a job there for you." So
hmm
I did. I went up and you know, fully suited and booted like a total wanker because how do you dress? Like I've been wearing tracksuits my whole life.
just black
Paul,
t-shirts, mate.
yeah, well, I found that out now. Yeah, but like I don't know, like if it was Paul's fault or my fault, it's Paul's fault. But it turned up on the wrong day. I turned up and he wasn't there, and
Right.
I met a guy called Mark Watson who was the head distiller there at the time. He's now at famous grouse. He was just like, listen, you've come all this way. Do you want me to show you how to distill gin? And I was like, yeah, crack, yeah, yeah.
Play on.
Yeah, why not? So I'm in this distillery, like suited and booted like a prick. Everybody else is wearing fucking overalls.
Any pictures of that? I'd be keen to see them.
Unfortunately. But I kind of left that, and I phoned my wife, and I phoned a good mate of mine, Rory Jackson, and I was like, I reckon we can make gin. Everyone seems to be after gin at the moment. So, truth, yeah, God's honest truth, we bought a still on Amazon and started, trying to make gin in the house, or in the garden shed it was, and that's how the Garden Shed Drinks Company was born.
Unreal.
And then we did the garden shed for like 6 months, and it went well because we were still kind of present in the rugby space.
Yeah.
And we got a lot of listings and things like that. And then when my contract ended, the Scottish Rugby Union offered me a job as a kind of scrum coach, kind of partnered with a uni, and I was like, no, rugby will always be there for me. Like I've always got rugby. I want to try this. I want to see how this goes.
Yeah.
My maths, my kind of forecasting business wise was absolutely shocking at the time. But that, because it was so wrong, because I was so shit at it, it gave me the balls to be like, nah, I'm gonna try and feed my family running this gym company type thing. And that's how I ended up getting into the space of booze post rugby.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's always like, I always find it funny because people on the outside are like, oh yeah, he's gone from rugby star to, but it's the in between bits of the story.
Yeah,
people will never really know. It's the going on to Amazon, right? How the fuck do we do this, or whatever? You stand there with your suit on and stuff. And so obviously, look, you've been in the drinks industry now for what, 6-7 years now? Longer?
Yeah, longer probably. Yes,
Longer?
probably about 8 years.
So talk us through now the companies you're a part of. Obviously, I know you're a part of a few, so I'd be keen to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, how long have you got? We've got the Garden Shed Drinks Company, which was, I guess, the stepping stone to everything else. It kind of gave us the confidence, and that's sadly now closing down this month actually. After a good 7-8 years of business, which is
there still a few more bottles to sell?
Yeah, we still got a few bottles, but now it's the kind of battle of like, what do we want to sell versus what do we want to keep? It is delicious gin, but it's just so hard to compete in that space now. With the, I guess 7 years ago, people would walk into a bar and say, can I get a Garden Shed perfect serve?
Yeah.
Whereas everyone just asks for a gin and tonic now.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, that was difficult, but yeah, I've got the Garden Shed Drinks Company. I've got a small, not small at all. I've got a stake in a rum company called the Remarkable Turtle, which is kind of partnered up with a couple of guys, and it's basically we got access to this beautiful Caribbean rum, but there was quite a lot of it out there, so we finished it in Scotch whisky casks, a point of difference.
Interesting.
Yeah, when we did a bit of research, and then when rum first arrived in Scotland, they brought a turtle with them, and they had a remarkable turtle feast, it was called, when it arrived in Glasgow. So that's why the brand's called the Remarkable Turtle.
Amazing.
But yeah, it's a pretty cool brand. And then I'm also involved in a little indie bottler called Unfiltered, who you guys know well, who did some fantastic work for us. That's a brand as well. Yeah, that's it there.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
So that was that's kind of a new venture, and it's exciting, and so I guess that stems off of my main line of business, if you like, which is the Caledonian Cask Partnership, which is a company I started in about 5 years ago, 6 years ago now. Just as we were coming into COVID, it was pretty clear that Garden Shed wasn't going to survive the kind of cull of on-trade gin skews, because Diageo was helping fund like bar staff and things like that. So we just couldn't offer anything that helped. So I
have a lot, because I know obviously there was a huge surge in gin, and like particularly small gin brands, companies similar to yourself. Are they all struggling now to compete with these big boys, or is are they all, or is there still a few that are kind of been able to weather the storm?
I think like the ones that are about now are, they're probably side projects, or
Right.
they're big companies like
Okay.
guys like Karun and stuff like that. They've
Yeah,
they've
yeah.
managed to survive, and we could keep going as well if we wanted
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
It just becomes we don't need to close the business. So there still is a gin market out there, but you're talking 200 odd brands at one point, all
Right.
competing for the same space. I'd say you're probably down to kind of 30, 40 brands now. It's just a super tough market to compete
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
Whereas, export wise, whiskey's it's not an easy sell, but it's much more desirable.
Yep, yep.
People want points of difference, I feel like, in whiskey, like different cask finishes. Every brand has, and to a non-whiskey drinker, I guess they're nuanced taste
Hmm.
variations, but to an experienced whiskey drinker, there's new stuff to try all the time. Whereas, yeah, I feel like that ship sailed pretty quickly in the gin industry.
Yeah, it was. It did seem as if it was kind of like in and out within a few years. It was kind of everywhere, wasn't it, at one point? And then
Yeah.
kind of. So, and is there any particular like trends that you've seen like recently in the industry like that have changed, whether that be within the booze industry or just in business in general, that's kind of impacted you guys, good or bad?
Yeah, I mean, like everything's tough just now, right? Everyone's kind of battling a little bit. Sales are down. The whiskey market's like way down. From when I started, there was this kind of rise of the pricing just kind of got crazy, and now it's just fallen back to the floor again. I think partly due to whiskey cask investment companies and things like that, kind of inflating prices. Um, but yeah, I think the whiskey industry, from what I hear from the older guys, is it's typically kind of peaks and troughs.
Yeah, yeah.
So we just happen to be in a trough part of the cycle at the moment.
Right.
But that's it's not for me. I think for my business, because we buy exclusively from distillery groups and things like that. I think we've been less affected because our pricing's always been reasonable for anybody that's interested.
Don't worry, we'll get it shared out. There better be some
Um,
buyers.
but yeah, no, I think that it's definitely tougher now than it has been in the previous kind of 5 or 6
Yeah,
years. But I'm not complaining.
yeah. And is there anything? So, I guess maybe more generally for business leaders, then, is there any like advice you would give to business leaders or people that are maybe probably more relevant for you, like coming out of rugby, say they're retiring, like in the coming months or what have you? Is there any other advice that you would give them that they could, tactical take and absolutely implement immediately?
Yeah, I think if I was hiring someone right now, I think I would be looking for someone ex-military or ex-sports. I think that for guys that have reached the highest level of rugby, there's a work ethic there, and everything else for me you can teach. Um, you know, like yeah, I've learned everything myself from in the last 7 years and I think that as long as you're willing to put the time in,
Yeah,
you'll get there.
yeah,
And
yeah.
the feedback's maybe not as quick as it is on a sports field. Um, but yeah, my advice to any of the rugby boys now, any of the young boys that ask, number one, like I said earlier, would be like network as much as you can, because you never know who you might need there. But there's no question for me that they've got a great work ethic, and that's the kind of step one. That's foundation one for me
Yeah,
in starting any business, and just having the balls to do it.
yeah.
Because, like yourself, I think if we hadn't done Garden Shed and I hadn't kind of gone down that road, I wouldn't have these other businesses. Because
No.
I speak to a lot of people and they're like, "Oh, I could never start a business," and I'm like, "It's fucking easy. Just register on Company's House and then put the work in." Yeah. There's nothing you can't learn now with the internet, with AI. You don't even need to learn anything anymore. You just fucking ask Chat GDP to do it for you. But yeah, those would be my two main bits of advice, and I think one of them goes hand in hand with the rugby career. As I think that the work ethic's there. I speak to guys that have got normal jobs just now, and Rory Jackson, who quite well. He works up at Glen Turret, and like he's just got a good work ethic,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he'll tell me stories about guys that are like, oh, I'm not coming in to meet this multi-million-pound client because it's my day off. Whereas Jack will be like, I'll meet him.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, that's the difference, and then that's why he's progressing in his career. So I still, yeah, I'm probably waffling a bit here, but I also think, when you leave school and you go to uni and you do your degrees and things like that, like no one really knows what you want to do.
yeah. Yeah, agreed.
And I didn't know that, that whiskey was what I wanted to do until, a few things didn't go my way and a
Yeah,
few
yeah,
bits of trial and error and things like that. So, yeah, don't panic, put the work in, and schmooze as much as you can.
yeah. And what drives you?
Freedom, I think now. Um, you know, yeah, I'm self-employed, so I'm pretty free to do whatever I want, and I think that's for me anyway. At the moment, I've got a little girl that's 9, and my wife and a dog, and having the ability to
What dog?
it's a he's a bastard of a dog. Um, but having the freedom for me to, like, right now the weather in Glasgow is outstanding,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
after
For the
this,
1 week of the year,
yeah,
but it's
yeah.
unreal. Yeah,
And
agreed.
if you live here and you don't capitalise on that 1 week,
Yeah,
then
yeah,
you've fucked it for the year.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so yeah, I think the thing that drives me is yeah, just having the freedom and the social life.
yeah, yeah,
We talked a lot about leaving Scotland, and I could do my job from anywhere.
yeah.
But we've got a great network of people here, and yeah, just I think if you're working for financial gain all the time, then it can get a bit tedious. But when you're working so that you don't have to work, that's that's
Hmm.
a nice thing to have.
And I think as well, I mean, I've for the majority of my career been around kind of sales environment, which is often measured by that financial metric. And I think like especially probably again when you're younger, like certainly in your 20s, maybe early 30s, whatever, you kind of maybe just driven purely by that. But then actually when you see, well, I guess without trying to sound cheesy or anything like that, but like what wealth actually is the freedom and options to do whatever you want when you want.
Yeah,
And I think there's upside to anything, there's downside to everything as well. Like whether it's corporate, I'd say I don't know if it's as comfortable as it maybe once was or whatever, because sadly there's been so many like redundancies and different things, but at least there's probably structure there that you might
yeah,
not get in a younger company or a startup or some sort of company that's scaling. But you also don't get that freedom to and that pace of learning as well, because
yeah,
like, and that's the thing, like we're a close knit team here at ORRJO, and I think like one of the things that we really enjoy is the fact that we share, like we're really honest with the team, we share what's working, what's not working, reality where the company is, if it's doing well, if it's not doing so well, and what we're doing about it. And that's exposure. Like I've worked for massive corporates and you get none of that exposure.
yeah,
Maybe at senior levels we got a bit of it, and based on performance and different things, but not really, like not the nuts and bolts of what's going on really at the top and in
yeah.
the boardroom and stuff like that. Which so it's interesting. And thinking about more personally, then is there any hobbies you do then that keeps you, I guess, maybe sane when obviously you're going through the kind of the ups and downs of the business life? Anything that you enjoy doing?
Yeah, yeah. I love the Friday Business Club with the boys.
Yeah. It's the most important group we're in.
Yeah. No, I think since I retired from rugby, I think like I always try and sign up to like one thing a year.
Yeah.
Like one big kind of physical challenge. So,
Don't remind me of that. Don't remind me
yeah,
of that.
this year.
PTSD.
With the help of ORRJO and yourself, we cycled 700 miles around Scotland, and then yeah, we did High Rocks as well. And I do quite enjoy like just go back to the cycling part. I do, like for me sometimes if I need to get away, I'll go
Yeah.
up to the hills in Aberfoyle and I'll take
Yeah.
a gravel bike or a mountain bike up there for 2 or 3 hours. And the amount of like thinking and headspace that you can get up there is yeah, it's pretty cool. So
Yeah.
yeah, I like getting out in nature a lot. Whether that's taking the dog out or taking the bike out or um, just being outside and having the ability to do that with my job is fuck, it's sunny on Wednesday. I'm gonna chuck
You're
the
going
bike
to
in.
do it. Yeah, yeah, 100%. And is there any like recommendations you've got in terms of like self development, whether that be around like books or anything you do that's just really served you well?
I think like I've read a lot of books. And thinking about it earlier, what books I think had the biggest impact on me, and probably I read a book called An Idiot's Guide to Tax,
All right.
which changed the game for me. Like, I think
Really?
once you understand tax a bit more,
Yeah.
your how you think about business changes.
Mm,
So that was a big book for me. I think every kind of every business owner, or in fact everybody should read that book, just to understand tax a little bit better, because something they should really teach you in schools, I think, but
yeah.
they don't, because they don't want you to know that there's actually ways of being way more efficient at it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that would be one book that I would suggest to everybody. But two others that one that really helped me business wise was the E Myth. I don't know if you've read that,
I'm not.
but it kind of breaks down business into like an entrepreneur, a kind of worker, and a kind of management role, and how everyone's not cut out for it all. And then once you understand that, the business, it's easier to help the business grow because you can identify what types of people fit into what category, and
Interesting.
it's really good. It's
I'll
about a
check that out.
lady. It's about a lady who starts a pie shop and she bakes these
Oh,
incredible
really?
pies. And that's her thing. But then she wants to scale the business. But that to her looks like cooking a million pies
Yeah, yeah.
by herself, which isn't scalable.
Mhm.
And it kind of breaks all that down. So I think for young entrepreneurs, that's
Yeah.
definitely a great book. And then another one through my rugby career was Black Box Thinking.
Yeah, 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 I've read that.
Just
Is it
because,
Matthew
yeah,
Syed?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Made a like you make a lot of mistakes through your rugby career, on and off the pitch, and they're highlighted by the media and things like that, and so you can fester in them in social
Of course.
media, and you can But reading that book gave me, I guess, the tools to be like, you made a mistake, park it, next thing.
Okay. Yeah, 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 nice.
So yeah, those are three books that I've read that I don't really read that much self help anymore. I felt like you reach a rooftop with it. Same with this kind of self help podcasts.
Hmm.
But yeah, those are three that I haven't actually read them for years, but they still stick out in my head as ones worth reading.
Yeah, nice. And I guess to close this out, is there any advice you'd give yourself if you were doing it all again?
Go to France.
Was that weather, money, everything?
Yeah, so I was just when I moved into England, I always say to Max, my biggest regret is not going to France. But yeah, I had the option to go and sign for a team called Worcester, or I could have gone to the south of France,
Right.
and I chose Worcester, and I regret it. um, but yeah, what was the question? Sorry, seriously.
Serious answer. Is there anything you would tell yourself if you were doing it all again? Any advice you'd give yourself?
Um, I don't know. It's tough because I'm pretty happy without sounding like a wanker. I'm pretty happy with where I'm at just now.
Yeah.
Um, so, like, would I change anything? I potentially would move to France, and I probably would have started in buying whiskey, like way before I did. Um, but no, I feel like everything has a knock-on effect, and
Yeah.
I would be worried about changing too much so that I didn't get to this place. And I feel very, very fortunate to be able to say that, because I am, I'm pretty happy with life at the moment. But yeah, I think it goes back to that old, like, if you want something and you're willing to put in the work, like, you'll get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you have to be willing to play the long game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think if any mistakes I made, I could, I think I could get back here.
Yeah. Nice.
In a nutshell, no, I wouldn't change. There wouldn't be any big changes I would make for sure.
That's a
I
good
wouldn't
one.
get a dog. That's what I would do.
To be honest, I'd probably agree with you on that one. Certainly, for me, it was to get a second dog. That's
Aye.
mental. That's always tricky. But look, Ryan, I appreciate your time, mate. It's good to always catch up. The next time, I'm sure we'll be over about 10 Guinness in our next Friday Business Club.
Way more enjoyable.
Yeah,
Do
absolutely,
a
mate.
podcast
Absolutely.
after 10 Guinnesses, then you'll get some real answers.
Oh God, yeah, yeah. Won't get any of it out. But no, look, mate, I appreciate it. Thanks for the time, mate. I'll ping you a message later on. All right.
Right, appreciate it. Cheers,
Top man.
guys.
Take care, mate. Bye
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 bye.
bye.